Okay, we can go ahead and get started here. So, hello everyone and welcome. My name is Michael Burke with InterDyn BMI. Thank you for attending today's webinar, Make Your Move to the Cloud with a Hybrid Network. Your presenter today is going to be Joe Falk, the IT Practice Manager with InterDyn BMI. Joe brings 20 plus years of network experience and most recently began overseeing InterDyn BMI's cloud offering with Office 365 and Azure. If you have any questions during today's presentation, please use the chat feature or the raised hand icon on your dashboard. There's also going to be some time for Q&A with Joe at the end of today's webinar. Thank you for your time today, Joe, and take it away.
All right, thank you, Michael. As he said, we're going to be talking about some Azure and Office 365. We are really going to be doing most of this in demo mode, so I'll start out with just a couple of slides just to get us through a certain point here, and just let you know what we're going to be talking about today. So. The hybrid network idea, we're going to be just showing a few things in terms of pictures of what those are going to look like, and then how does Azure fit into that, and then we're going to talk about the new offerings in Office 365 because there are some changes since October, how Office 365 will also fit into that hybrid offerings. So with that, let's just go take a look at some of the ways people are using the hybrid network. And when I say hybrid network, I'll go ahead and say it's your network that you're currently working in, your current LAN, your current WAN, whatever you're working on, and then extending it out to a cloud location. And a cloud location like Azure is what we're talking about specifically here. So in a hybrid network, typically you're going to connect up your network through some sort of site-to-site VPN connection from your local, and then share users, Active Directory users, back up into that hybrid network extension. So whether it be Office 365 by using DirSync, or into the Azure space where you would actually put another Active Directory controller on the network, and with those you'd share your user database between the two, and all of your applications then would be treated exactly the same as if that was in your own LAN space. So it's just like another network somewhere else, one of your data centers that just extended somewhere else. So how do people get into there today? Well, many are taking the path that gets some of the stuff offloaded, and that's mostly the Exchange and some file storage offloaded right away. So they're going into the Office 365 world, putting SharePoint up there, using SharePoint to be the replacement of your traditional file and folder sharing that you'd have locally, and then moving all of your Exchange up into that Office 365 world as well. So the local user, all they're really going to see is the difference is, well, their Outlook looks the same, their mailbox looks the same, the location of that mailbox happens to be up in the Office 365 space. Instead of going to go to a mapped folder, they would instead potentially go look at a SharePoint site, and that SharePoint site will be where all their files are going to be stored. They may do some, and we're going to show these kind of things too, they may do some version control in those files, etc. It just tends to be a much cleaner and more rich environment as to what you can put around that. And when you look at a file and folder share, you just see the files, folders, and no real data around the outside of that telling you anything about it. Where in the SharePoint world, you have that same file and folder sort of structure built out there, but you have some information around that is being shared graphically for the users, which is very rich environment to be able to share information, and tends to improve on the communications between folks. And the version control is obvious, I guess. How people use the extension of their network, hybrid network, out into the Azure space, is they might use, for instance, they're going to be doing an upgrade on an application. The easy, obvious answer is, rather than go buy new hardware, they'll just spin up a test environment up in Azure, and they would just go ahead and build out a server to whatever specs they need to get that started by the system requirements, install the application, and make the connections from their local network, just like that server was in their own space. It's a great way of getting that done, especially if you get a new application to be installed, you're trying to do a test upgrade, you're trying to do a development environment. All those spaces are, rather than going buying the hardware, people are just go ahead and saying, let's just rent the space. And then if, let's just say it's a test environment and only needs to be kept alive for a month or 2 months, you run it for a month or 2 months, then when you're not using it, you just shut it down. You don't pay for anything more than just the storage space there, and not the processing power while that's turned off. And then if you need to turn it back on, you turn it back on, and again, you're only paying for what you use when you use it. So that's how some folks are using. Other ways people are extending their network is they're dealing with SQL replication. So if you have a SQL server local and you want to replicate all that data, well, you can do data backups up there, or you can just do a SQL replication up to a Azure environment, and you have another SQL server that's in your cluster of SQL servers that you can actually just point the data to, and it doesn't have to be necessarily physically in your same space. You could have one local and one up in the Azure environment, giving you a little bit of a disaster recovery sort of built in. And others are extending their network to use just the Azure for backup, which is a decent starting point as well. So you could use just Azure backup. You pay for the storage that's up there, and you just run your backups up to that space. You'd have potentially a local backup as well, so that way you've got 2 layers of it, and that's usually what people like to do, is have a couple parachutes to fall back on. One's local backup and one's up in Azure, and that would be giving you a good sense of DR as well. That's disaster recovery. So just a picture of how that might look, and this is just sort of a graphical image of how we might build that out. Is the workstation on your company network kind of represents your local LAN. The VPN connection you create between Azure and your local LAN, done through a virtual network that you build up in Azure. And what people will typically do is, if they're, let's just take Dynamics GP for instance. It could be any application you want, but let's just take that application. So if you have Dynamics GP, you'd probably have a SQL server up in the Azure space. You'd probably either do web client if you want to communicate via web client, or if you use the RDS remote desktop servers, that would be the exact same functionality up in Azure. You'd put the remote desktop server up there, you put the SQL server up there. We would also put an Active Directory domain controller up there, so that would keep all your users that you've currently used in your network, a copy of them up in the Azure space. So typically you do that, and that also protects you in the event that you were to lose your internet connection between your local. You could still remotely log into all the Azure stuff, and your entire GP environment is up there and accessible, just like it would be as if you were at your local network. So this is a typical kind of a hybrid deployment. So you might still, at your company network down here, have you might still have other servers that are local, like a print server. Possibly you're going to keep local. You may have, let's say, you're using SolidWorks, and SolidWorks tends to right now not have much for a cloud offering. I think they're going to have to get there one day, but because the files are bigger, and an application like that, it's too hard to drag back and forth to open up and view. So in a case like this, we would say all the processing really is happening up in the cloud. You're just getting back and forth whatever that keyboard and mouse is from the remote desktop server. So if you have GP up there, remote desktop server would talk over to your SQL server, and that's where all the processing happens. So if you were to drop your connection, all that would still stay up there. You would just go, find it, either your backup internet connection, or the user could go back to their home or some other public network and just jump onto the remote desktop server and pick up where they left off. So that's typically how it's going. And I'm just going to kind of watch here to see if there's any questions that pop up. And I know Michael is also monitoring that as well. But please feel free to toss in a question here and there as you see fit. All right. So this is going to take me to the demo area. So I'm just going to show you, this is kind of what the interface looks like when you were managing Azure in the back end. You got it's just a portal. It's a portal front end. You have your virtual machines, you have your cloud services, you have some data storage areas, networking pieces. This is how the environment looks. We're going to go jump into that and show you what it looks like live. So things you're going to get out of that is going to tell you a little bit about what your machine status is, kind of what its utilization is, a quick look at what's out there for each machine that's out there. So I'm going to go jump into that demo right now. So this is that Azure portal that we were just kind of showing you. I'm just going to take it back to the front end here, and this is how it would look based off that same picture. This is a live look at it. This is real data in Azure right now. So I've got one server that's up there. It's a virtual machine. This is the other information that's about. There's a couple storage accounts I've got out there. I've got one in a closet that's in the central United States, and I've got another one that's north central. So in 2 separate closets. And I split my data across there just because that way I've got it so all my data is not in one spot. And some people do that, and some people put their backups in one closet, and they'll put their, they'll put maybe their cloud service, their SQL box in another data center. if you're going to be doing applications that are going to be communicating with each other, you're best off obviously keeping your remote servers in the same data center, and actually you create groups that puts them in the same groups, so that, or affinity groups, so that way they don't have any issues with speed going across there. So let's just jump into one of these virtual servers. So I've got that's virtual machine right here. I'm just going to go ahead and click on it and get some information about that machine. So you'll see this is the dashboard. This is a live look at the dashboard. So right now it's going to just pull some data about that. Now I just spun it up just a little bit ago. I had it shut down for a while there, and you can see that on my graph here. And it's just telling you a little bit about each component on that. What's the processor at? What's the RAM utilization at? When it first popped up, it probably peaked real quick, and it's just kind of sitting there relatively quiet right now, not doing much, which is typical for a server. It's not doing anything more. SQL's on it, but nothing's really happening with that. This tells a little bit of information about the machine. It's got 2 cores. I could take up to 20 cores if I needed to. So it tells me a little bit about just a quick view at what the data is at. So those are the basics on what it looks like here. It tells you a little bit. There's a DNS name that's associated with it, as you can imagine. It's got a public virtual IP address. Now I can also assign an internal IP address that I would want to use if I was extending my network, and most people will. In a case like this is just for demo purposes. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense because it's only me that's connecting up to it. So let's just go ahead and look at some other pieces about this. I can drill in a little bit further and check a little bit more in terms of what that graph means that you saw on the front page. Well, this is actually going to tell me the disk I/O information, the network information, what's coming in, what's coming out, what kind of speeds I'm getting on that. Some things, if you're going to be monitoring, you might have a monitoring tool that's going to run across this, that's going to actually tell you, hey, is this something I should be worried about or not? And that's very much the same as if you would do it if it was on-premise. As a matter of fact, when we manage our customers' Azure servers, we actually just put the same agent down that we put on when it's on-premise, and we get the same information back about it. It's just a virtual server sitting in a different spot. So if you're using Hyper-V or you're using VMware, same concepts. This is just sitting up in a data center than somewhere else. It's still a virtual machine. You do have some power in here in terms of what this is kind of the firewall. What I would say the firewall equivalent is to this portal. It lets you either poke holes in the outside to get back inside. So if you see there's a 1433 for SQL, and 3389 is remote desktop. So the standard ports. Public port is on the outside as a different port, obviously, mostly for protection. Now you can tighten that way down if you want, and you can make a lot of changes to this. But this is just the basic front end, the firewalling that comes with it by default. So, but you do have the power to do, and this is I think what is probably the most important thing here is you build your VMs for what you need now. You don't have to, like in the world of the physical, let's say you have a physical server, you buy servers for giving me enough processing power for the next several years. In the virtual world, when you're talking about hosted servers, you really buy for what you need now, and if you need to increase that, you increase it, and then you just pay for that as you increase it. It doesn't make sense to go out and put this thing up here as an 8-core with 56 gig of RAM. Even if I think I'll need that in 2 or 3 years down the line, if what I'm using right now is just a 2-core and 14 gig RAM, that's what I'm going to put myself out there and provision for that. And as I see the need for that thing being utilized more and more, and I do monitor it. Then I watch and see that it's peaking out all the time at 50% or above. Well, then you might want to look at add more cores to it or add more memory, depending on which piece is peaking out. But this is the power of buying what you need and paying for consumption. You don't go out and overbuy things. You just make the adjustment, and from that point forward, you start paying for what you're consuming in the new size VM. If I wanted to change it, I would click this, change it, and then it would just spin up. It takes about 5 minutes or so to do that, so I'm not going to do that right now. But we are going to add some drive space to this, so we are going to take a few minutes to do that, and I can show you how that works as well. But so that's really how it. That's the power of using something like Azure. You're gonna go out there and you're gonna say, well, I'm only gonna rent what I need to rent, and that's really what I need. And for instance, if I wanted to have a test environment, my test environment may not have to be quite as robust as my production environment. So I could build it out exactly the same. I might not give it as much RAM because I'm only going to have 3 or 4 people hitting it. So that's kind of how how you play that out. And I'll show you again. I'm going to take it back here. Currently, this machine is up, which you can see all that information on that. But I can shut it down when I don't need to use it. So if you click on it right here, I can shut it down. I can restart it. I can attach disks, which we're going to do in just a second here. But all that power is being handled right here from the portal, and someone managing it, if you had just your management, like a management agent on there, you would do the same thing with it. So this just gives you the front-end portal power of Azure. So, and I'll just pause briefly here to make sure I don't see any questions pop up there. Okay. So what I'm going to do here is I've got a machine. Let's just go ahead and take a look at it. I've got a remote desktop open with it. So here's how it looks when it's open. So by default, they give you this information about it, which you kind of saw on the previous screen. But this is just it's just a server, just a virtual machine. So I can come up here. I can look at all the stuff that's in here. This temporary storage D is what they give you mostly for swap file. That's an area you don't really mess around with it. I added this volume E. This is just a 500 gig partition I just tossed up there. There's nothing really in it. I have a folder on there. What we're going to do is add another one. I'm just going to add another 100, just 100 gig folder just to see how it looks. I just want you to see, what it really takes. And again, this is all just remote desktop. I just clicked on the connect and I popped it up. So on this virtual machine right here, I'm going to go ahead and attach a disk to it. And I'm going to put it in my normal. This is fine here. Just got to tell what size I want here. All right. So if you click on this, it kind of tells you. All right. So it's going to be attaching that now. I don't know. I didn't see what size I don't recall typing my size in there. So we'll let it build here for a little bit. So. And we'll check and see where my disks are set here. Yep, so there it is. Okay, so it just popped up here. So attached it. Great. So now I'm going to go take a look at that in the actual machine. And on the virtual machine, it just takes a second here for us to see the machine here. 1 second as the screen's drawn for you. All right, so there's a little bit of activity going on with that drive being added. I'm not sure it looks like it's done by what it says here, so all right, we'll give it 1 more second here. Nope. Now it appears I've lost connection to it here. 1 second. All right, we're going to go ahead and reconnect to that. Yeah, this may take just a second here. So as you saw, that was just the standard RDP front end to it. So we'll bring it up here. While we're waiting here, I'll see if there's any questions from the field there. All right, here we go. Okay, so now we're back to where we were there. So let me go ahead and take a look at the drives out there, what's out there now. And we'll just do disk management just like normal if you're familiar with the regular tools here on Windows. Okay, so here's my new disk. Just attached it as a 200 gig. And it says it's already healthy partition, so I should be able to go see that. So let's go take a look and see if it's even out there. Yep, so there it is. Create a new folder. Maybe we'll go SQL logs or something like that. So it's, I mean, it was that easy to add more space to our virtual environment and our virtual server. Now, if you're going to go with the on-premise concept, if you have a SAN, great, you add more drive space, or if you have space already out there, you would just allow more space, you'd provision more space that same way, which is much how we did it here. If you're on a physical server and you don't really have a SAN that's out there, you'd probably have to add more drives, and then you'd partition the drives, and then you'd have the drives associated with machine's OS. Well, you saw how it didn't take a whole lot to go ahead 200 gig more space. So what a person's going to use this for is potentially they may have this drive space out here for, let's just say, SQL logs. This might be SQL backups. You want to keep them in separate spaces so they don't run into each other. You can always add more drives to a space. You can add more, just attach another drive like we did here and just change the size of it. So there's all kinds of options you've got for how to bring them in, how to take them out. So that's really as simple as it is. So I can configure the cores and memory by just giving more cores and more memory through here, or I could go ahead and add more drive space to that virtual machine. So it's really that simple when it comes down to what you're trying to do for your virtual machine. And again, this is just one server. I do want to walk through the next phase here. This one's going to take a little time, but I do want to just let you see it, and then we'll kind of jump out of that, and I'll poke around a couple of areas. But I want to build another virtual machine just so you can see that how it is to build a machine. It's pretty straightforward, so you'll be surprised here. So I have my Customer Summit SQL here, so let's go ahead and create a new virtual machines. Now, there's a whole bunch of things you can do with, when you say new, you mean new virtual machine, new cloud service, new mobile service, new website, there's all kinds of things. I'm going to go ahead and pick from the gallery, and the gallery is growing every day. So I'm going to be surprised at what else is out here. But so there's all these pre-builds, and all they really are, and then for those that are the real IT nerds out there, you just take a Windows server and they sysprepped it, and they made it a VM, and then you just put whatever application pieces that you have on there. And then they just made that image be available for us just as a kickoff. It's more of a springboard. So if you look through here, you're going to see SQL 2014 Enterprise Edition. I mean, you still have to pay for the licensing on these machines when you bring them forward. Like for instance, if it's a SQL server, and we'll talk about licensing as I'm kicking off this virtual machine here. But the thing is all pre-built for you. So all you really have to do is start it up, and then the configuration isn't quite so difficult where you have to go grab a whole bunch of stuff that's somewhere else, and you could actually store your own images after you've made one. They do have some filtering on the left-hand side here, so you can filter down to something that's more in what you're looking for. But all these pieces are out here for you to go ahead and grab and get going on it. So I'm just gonna pull up a SQL 2012 R2 data center, and by default they're data center because all these are considered data center because you're hosting multiples on the same, this is in the hosted environment, so you get the kind of the top that's available out there. That's the beauty of it. So I'm going to go ahead and move this thing forward. So it's going to ask me what I want to call this thing. So let's just call it my server 2012 for right now. It's an R2, so we'll go that way. I have some choices as to what you want it to be for what cores, and again, start with less. Start with what you need now, with maybe a little bit of breathing room, but you don't need to overbuy right now, because if you find later on that the utilization is high enough, then you just bump it up. And it really doesn't take much to bump it up. So I'm going to make this be let's just make it a 2-core 3.5 gig of RAM. It doesn't need to be much. Let's go with admin. Joe, I know that's not a good, people don't want to use admin in their name of a username if you're normally going to do that kind of thing, but I'm going to go ahead and put in this. All right, so I think I'm good there. It'll tell you if your password's not going to be a clean password. I'm going to have this join my current cloud service. You could create another cloud service as a separate, but I'm going to go ahead, because I'm in the same cloud service, I'm going to keep my stuff together. This is where you do have the options on as to where you're going to put it. Since I picked my same cloud service, maybe I'll drop this back here. You will be able to pick where you want this thing to be. So what region you want it to be if you're going to pick a different cloud service. So I'm going to go back here. And I can use my current storage account, which is what I will do in this case. I don't have any availability sets out there, so when you get into this a little bit further, you're going to want to create an availability set, but I'm going to go ahead and build this out here. And then it gives you some new options where you can put on some of their anti-malware. If you have your own licensing for that, you'd apply your own licensing. They give you some options as some add-ons. So this will take a little bit here to spin up. And while it's doing its work, you can kind of see down here, it gives you some status. If you click on the status, it'll say it's creating the virtual machine. Okay, good. And there's not much to tell you about it, but it's just creating it. So we'll let it create it for a little while. It usually takes 5 minutes or so. And if it doesn't finish by the time we're done talking about this, we'll just come back and look at it before we call it a day here. So, so for the licensing, here this is the piece now, because you're hosting this somewhere else. For remote desktop services, if you're going to use remote desktop services, you do have to purchase the remote desktop services hosted versions of the licensing. So that's usually through a vendor. Like we can resell that. If you have your own enterprise agreement, you can get it that way. For the Office stuff, now I'm going to give you some. Here's the best way to do the Office stuff, the cheapest way. When you have to use remote desktop services, let's say for instance in an application that uses Office, and you need to have Office up on those on that virtual machine, you have to actually pay for all those versions of Office for each of those users that's going to be using that machine. So for instance, if I have 10 users that are going to use GP and they need to have Office on that virtual machine because they're not using the web client, they're going to use the remote desktop client up in Azure, they would each have to be paying for that Office as well on that virtual machine. However, this is the best however that I'm just so glad Microsoft has kind of been moving this direction with their licensing, is if they have an Office 365 license that includes the Office licensing with it, that would count actually, because that allows you to use a user to use Office on 5 different machines. Well, the remote desktop server is one of those machines probably, and you'd be in compliance that way for your Office licensing, and you wouldn't have to purchase those Office licenses up there for that same user on that hosted machine, which is a great benefit. So, Microsoft gets it. They want to get you in Azure and they want to get you in Office 365. So, the licensing model has changed dramatically, and buying Office package licensing is not the way to do it anymore. Really, the way to buy Office licensing, and you can do all the ROI calculators that you want, but it's pretty straightforward. And I'll tell you what the new versions are out there. But it's just cheaper to rent it because you get all the current versions, and you're only paying for what you need. Where in the world of the old box set of Office, you always had to have all the counts you needed, for those users. And if you figured you're going to be changing your user count over the year, well, that's kind of challenging. You have to keep on juggling that count and always have the count out there correct for your users. It's expensive, and it's expensive up front. Where if in the rental fee, you're paying for the user to rent Office or use Office per month per user. And as that user count changes, well, then so does that price, which is kind of nice. All right, so our machine is still provisioning here, so we'll give it a little more time. And if I try to even jump into remote desktop to it, I really won't be able to see much on it. So if I click on it, I can kind of see where it's at. It's just going to be telling me it's in the provisioning state, and I won't get a whole much information from it. But it's it's at 2 cores. I have 1 disk on there. I didn't add anything new to it. I could add more to it, but there's not much to tell about it right now. You saw the state of it was an A2 with 2 cores and 3.5 gig RAM. So it'll be just a little while yet for that to finish. So while that's doing that, I'm going to go ahead and jump back out of here and talk about Office 365. And I kind of want to just give one quick look at the slides here. And we started hitting on the Office 365. In October, a relatively major change happened in how Microsoft was going to be presenting their Office 365 licensing and their Office licensing in general. Previously, you had the option of, if you're going to buy into Office 365, you always had to be getting the mailbox and everything else as well. Even if you weren't ready for it, you're going to end up paying for it. Well, they changed that model, and they also changed the model of it, which is a little bit challenging before there used to be this 25 user count and then 300 user count and then the enterprise user count. Well, now they've just kind of split it up into two sections, this business section and the enterprise section. The business section is up to 300 users, and then the enterprise is any count you want to go with. It doesn't really matter. It could be 10, it could be 300. Doesn't really matter. The features are similar, but I'll take you to a site where you can find the features. But the basic rule is they have a version of Office that's going to give you just mailboxes only, which is like what this first Business Essentials is. Mailboxes only, online service only, not including the Office application. The next package is Office 365 Business, which means just give me the applications, and I can use them on the web as well. And not mailboxes in the sky, not SharePoint, but just Office, and it gives me the Office Basic, and it's a great way to do it because you're renting. In this case, you're renting Office from Microsoft. And then the third package is give me both Office application and the online services. And if you look at the enterprise, it's exactly the same. E1 is just give me mailboxes. Office 365 Pro Plus, which didn't exist before, just give me the application, no mailboxes. And then the last one is Enterprise E3, which is the same as it was before. Give me mailboxes and the application. So in all of the plans, they include the uptime, which is good, the 24/7 support, which is great to use. This piece right here did not exist. The Active Directory integration did not exist for all the packages before. They didn't include them in those 25 and unders. So that's a big change and a big addition. And what that means is that you create a directory sync from your local Active Directory up to Office 365, and with that, you only manage one set of users. It is the way to do it, and of course, it does require you had to be at Windows Server 2008 or above, but that is by far the way to get it done. So if you know of folks, or if you yourself are a customer that is dealing with Windows Server 2003, now is the time to migrate that server to at least 2008 functional level, and you may as well just go to 2012. It really is not going to hurt you. That is a big feature add-on that all of the Office 365 people will appreciate. And with that, of course, they're just improving. I mean, it's improving. I'd say weekly probably is how the Azure Active Directory is being handled. I mean, currently right now we're putting in Active Directory servers out there. I would say within a year or so, that requirement probably be lessened because the Active Directory in Azure will be a little more full-featured, that it can handle the directory sync from local without having to put an AD controller up there. So that's going to be a big change. So I'm going to take you to the site where you can find more information about that, and then I think we can also make that available online as well after this session is done. So let's just, if you just go to office.com, you'll find it. So it's not, or office365.com, you'll find it. So I'll just drill into the right spot. So for business, and we're going to see all the plans, and I'm going to push up all the plans here so you can kind of see what we're talking about here. All right, so this is that same graphic, only it's the live version, so I can scroll down and show you more. You kind of lose that effect when you're in PowerPoint, of course. So as I was saying, there's that 300 user max on the business side of it, and then the enterprise side of it is unlimited. And again, this first plan right here does not include the applications, as you can see, but just gives you the online versions, your mailbox, your SharePoint, etc. Business plan, it gives you the applications, but not the mailboxes, etc. And Office 365 Business Premium is giving you both. Same rules for the enterprise. So you get the E1, the Pro Plus, and the E3. So there is another one that's E4 that includes voice, but it's not. That's going to be changing shortly as to how that's being deployed. So. All right, so let me go just pop back over there to see if our virtual machine has been completely provisioned yet. It is, so it says it's ready to go. So, okay. Well, let's go ahead and connect to it and see what we can do with it. So the first time you connect to it, it's just like any other server. That account doesn't exist on that one. We'll give it a second. The first time through, again, it's going to be a little bit of a slow start because it's going to create all the pieces around that server. And it's like watching grass grow when you do this the first time through, but we'll see. All right, there we go. So go ahead and jump in there. But again, we're talking, I talked for probably 10 minutes there, and your server's all provisioned, and 10 minutes is not too bad of a way to get this thing going. So if you think about what that just did right there, I mean, in the world of other servers out there, it takes 10 days to get the server after you order it, then you got to go put it in and take a couple hours to build all the pieces. Now, sure, I still have to do some configuration for this thing like I would have to do on a regular server, but it's very quick. Now, if you're already in the Hyper-V world or in the VMware world, you understand the idea of creating virtual machines is much quicker than physical, and you already know that answer. So this is really no different. It's just that I'm provisioning them somewhere else on a data center that's outside of my space here. So there's our server. Yep. So we'll go ahead and I haven't connected to anything else really, but it's just in my space there. I could go try to browse out and find another server that was just on before. So this is a 2012 R2, as you can see down below here. This is they got the little cleaner little Windows icon that comes in the R2, and some of the interface looks a little different. So the other one I think was just an R1, 2012 R1 server. So yeah, that's as tough as that is out there, folks. I mean, there's not much more to tell you than that. It's pretty straightforward. If we wanted to install anything, we can install from here. If you had an ISO that you had to install from your local, or let's say you have a CD of an application you want to install, you turn that CD into an ISO, push it up here, and that's it. So, because again, if you extend your network, which we were talking about in the beginning, this is just going to be on a subnet on your own network, so you'll just go browse to it. You'd have a DNS entry in your local server that's going to be updated from your Active Directory already. That would pick up where the DNS is of this thing, and it would just, if you're just sitting in your local network in your LAN, you go connect to it just like you connect to a server here in the house. So it's the same thing. It's a great way for people to start migrating some of their applications from the local to the cloud, so they don't have to have that risk that's up there in the cloud. So I see my time zone is set for a different time zone. Not a big deal. We could fix that. But all right, so I'm going to jump out of here. And I need to log out completely out of my portal here, so I can go jump into, I wanted to show you the Office 365 environment. Let's just close that current tab here so I don't lose our connection here. We're going to go jump into it. This is just a demo environment we built. With Microsoft, they give you the ability. Now I'm going in as Karen, I forget what my last name is with this. It's Karen something or other. I'll find out here in just a minute. So we'll log in. So this is a full demo environment of Office 365 with all of the tools deployed onto it, everything. So what you see when you first go in there, now I don't have it installed this way on mine, but your first time in, when you go into let's say you have an E3 agreement or something Pro Plus and better, you would have all your apps that are here, and these are apps that are going to be installed. If you just click here, it just puts the installer on your machine, and it just fires up the full version of Office. Now, I've already got mine on my machine, but I'm just going to show you the web app interface here, so that way you get it all in one spot here. All the mobile apps, if you wanted to go to this site, this is a live site, so this is my demo site. I can go there with my mobile app, but I really can't show you that on the presentation here today because I don't have a camera that's pointing to a handheld. I guess I could, but I didn't prepare that today. So anyway, we're going to see all the apps in the web app format But again, if you have Outlook, you're just going to use your Outlook like normal and just point to this as you normally would. But this is Outlook in the web interface. And again, this is a fully functional site. So I'm going to go ahead and this is Karen. I forget what my name is here. My last name happens to be. But I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to send something to. Well, let's go. There's Amy. I think is one of the people that's in my contacts. So yes, Amy Alberts. That's wonderful. And we're just going to send out just a quick email to her. So, there it goes. I look at my sent items. Oh, sure enough, there's my mail test. So Karen Berg, that's my name, Karen Berg. So with Karen, she has all of her calendar, just like you'd have in your normal on-premise. Nothing different there. Again, this is the web version of it, but it renders the same way. If I create something new, I would create a new calendar appointment right from here, and I could go put whatever I wanted to put in there. So I'll just go ahead and discard this. But all these appointments are out there. So if I were to click into one, it just pulls up the appointment and tells me what's in it. So I'm going to go ahead and close that. In this particular setup, all the people are listed in here. I could go pull the company address book, but I don't. This is I don't have a full company address list here, but yeah, my people list here, I'll go ahead and click that. Let me get rid of our screen here. Oh, hold on, we got one question here.
Yeah, we got a couple of them. Do you want to answer them now, or do you want to go over them during the Q&A session, Joe?
Sure. I can grab these later, I guess. These are all. Yeah, I'll get after them later. I think unless there's something I was pressing right now that needed to be answered there. I'll say they're okay. Okay. We're almost to that point anyway. So let me just go get a little bit further down the line here. I'm just going to take you to the SharePoint site that is set up with this person right here. Then I'm going to move this along just a little quicker here. It's a little bit pokey on the demo site for some reason, but we'll give it just a second here. There we go. All right, I'm going to drill into a little bit further, but this is the public-facing side of our SharePoint. This is the team-facing side of our SharePoint. In this demo world, both of those are available. I'm just going to go drill into the IT section, only because my background's IT. I want to go see what's out there. This is how we would replace your file and folder structure with something like this. So you have a section where you have a bunch of files that are uploaded for people, and it's got some information about it. But you also see, like in the discussion board that's over here, there's a little how-to video on something. You could do how-to videos on just about any other thing of these things that are here. There is a little help desk that's listed in here too that was set as part of the site. But you can see this is a little bit more of a rich environment than just your standard file folder structure. Now, of course, someone has to build the stuff out, but on the other hand, it can be done. Now, this calendar right here is just a group calendar that's based off of this site. So this site has the ability to do what they're going to do. But if I had a connection from my calendar to this group calendar, those items would be shared between the two of them. So I could actually see something on my calendar that might be on this group calendar that I shared with that calendar. So it gives you the ability to have a little bit of a communication between your own stuff and like a group stuff with the site, with the SharePoint site. So again, we were just hanging off the IT main desk here, but you can see that there's sub-sites here on this site here, and if I went to HR and Careers, I would jump into that instead, and you can kind of see how their site might look different from what the IT site looked like. And then as you click on the top there, you see the stuff down below there. These are little sub portions of that site. If I were to go into that, it would just take me to a different spot in that site. So very rich content as to how you get around things, and then forms and policies, that might be where you're going to have some files that people can upload or download at that point, as opposed to just sticking them out there and then having to train someone how to go get it. Your training here would, I think, be dramatically lessened. I mean, I've been finding that, as we've been using our internal website for stuff like this, for the HR stuff, is it's much easier to someone's not going to run into something for 3 or 4 months in their job, but if you tell them here's where you can find the spot, for some information you need later on, pointing them here is a lot easier because they can go navigate this and find a little bit more information about a file right here, as opposed to having to go dig in And so now, if I wanted to do something with this, this just happens to give me a quick share or screen preview of it. You can probably barely see that on your screen, but then you can kind of see the information about that file. You could open it, you could share it, you could follow it if you wanted to. But this is all the same stuff that you'll see in any SharePoint sites. None of this stuff you have to kind of configure. This kind of comes as part of the when you set it up. You can customize all of it, but it's kind of nice where you're at with this right here. So I think we're at that point where I need to stop and take some of these questions though, and I think I'll just kind of leave this as where it's at, and maybe I should go check and see that our machines are still up there, so don't have to change anything there. All right, so let me just bring forward the Q&A here. So someone was asking about buying Office. Was there a question above that?
Yeah, I can.
First one.
Yeah, we can start with that one. Buying new versions of Office every couple of years is expensive. Does Office 365 users automatically get the latest version of Office as they're released?
Well, I would say pretty close to when they're released. I think that they release it at this point in time, they release it about the same time they put it on the Office 365 and they upgrade you and they change you. You would then have the option at that point, whenever that new release comes out, is to actually install the new release. So when you go to your Office 365 front end and a new version is going to come out, which, you know, we're in that window of any time now, they're going to probably be looking at, you know, the next version, and then I would say probably in the next year to year and a half, people will be starting to shift over to a different version of that. But you would see that on your Office 365 portal, and then you just download the MSI, and it would actually just kind of install for you. So your users would have to install that one by one. You can also, as an administrator, push that that installer out to everyone else's if you're using some of the management tools that are built in here as well. So hopefully it answers that question.
Awesome. Yeah, I think it does. So the other question we have right now is, does Office 365 work if your PC is offline?
Yes. What the question, the confusion there I think that people mostly have is I showed, in this case I showed all the web apps of Office 365, but as you saw right in the beginning, it gave you that, do you want to install Office 365 local to your machine? In most cases you would say you would do that. Now if you're on a public computer, like at the library or at your Aunt Edna's house, because you're on vacation, and you want to go use your Office apps, not the ones that she has, because she's got Office 95 on there, something terrible. So you could at that point just go into your Office 365 account and then just use all the web version of your Office apps. You wouldn't probably install it on Aunt Edna's machine, but let's just say you had two work machines, or you had a work machine and maybe a desktop and a traveler that you take around with you. You could install that on both of those two machines because you're entitled to 5 installations of it. So as far as the portion of the email and the functions that are external, let's just say like your SharePoint. Well, your SharePoint is going to be online, so it's up in the cloud, so you really wouldn't be able to get to it if you're offline. However, if you have, and you are going to be set up with OneDrive as well, is you would use your OneDrive to store your files when you're going to be offline like that, and when you get back online, you'll sync back up automatically. But then you could then move stuff into the SharePoint if you had to for that point. And your email, you can use your email locally when you're offline, but nothing, of course, is going to be sent out, and you can't receive anything while you're offline. But then as soon as you get connected, anything that was pending to go out, it's going to be in your outbox, will send out automatically, and then all the mail that's waiting for you will just flow down to you at that point. So, but if you're using the apps that are these apps that are the ones I've been showing today, like these are the web-based apps, well, they're web-based, so you wouldn't get to them if you're not online. But of course, you would probably have installed, like I said, you probably would have installed Office to your machine as well, so that way you'd have access to all your apps. It's just a copy. It's just the installation is all it is. So hopefully that answers that question.
Perfect. Thanks, Joe. And is there any other questions from the audience? Let me pull up the chat as well. Okay, that looks like it's it. So if there's no additional questions, I'd like to thank you all again for attending the presentation today. Thank you for the great presentation, Joe. Please feel free to reach out to your account executive, account manager, or contact us if you'd like to learn more about moving to the cloud or anything during today's presentation. On behalf of everyone at InterDyn BMI, we just want to thank you for your attendance and have a great rest of your day.
Yep, thank you, everybody.
Thanks, guys.